Everyone I spoke to said, you're not going to believe this, but somehow Middlesbrough's got worse. And it is entirely down to mass immigration. I don't think it's shocking or controversial to say that when 80% of your town has been replaced by swarthy foreign chaps from the third world, I don't think it's controversial to say that that is an unsustainable and unwise.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing returning guest is that angry bootneck again. He's always bloody angry, but he may have a right reason to be angry this time. So let's get into it. Matty, thanks for coming along, and how are you?
Always a pleasure, Nick. Nice to see you again.
No, nice to see you. Last time we spoke, you were about to come back home to England to visit family, friends. You'd not been home for a few years. I forgot how many years you said. But you've been home now. You've hopefully had a nice time to see family and friends. You've gone back to California. And I wanted to talk to you about the differences between when you left home and moved to another country to you going home now. Was there any changes from what you could see visually? Has the country deteriorated? Was there only one or two little changes? What did you experience coming home?
Well, I've got plenty to say about it. It'd been over 2 years, which was the longest I've been away due to work and stuff. So I went back and I was staggered at the change in that relatively short amount of time. There's an ongoing joke in my family, right? My missus is from the States. She's born and raised in California, and she went to university in the UK. We started living together, and it went from there. So we've got a long-running joke in the family. Obviously, me being a gruff northerner with a gruff northern family, we didn't have the wedding in the UK. I did it here, and only my brother came out because the rest of them are miserable buggers. So we joke that we had our honeymoon in Middlesbrough. Because obviously, after we did it, we went over to see the family. So she's from California. She tells everybody, "Oh, yeah, I'm the only Californian who's ever had a honeymoon in the borough." So she knows what it's like. Probably went over there about 12 years ago. First time she'd ever been. And she was staggered by what we saw. We got off the train in the central train station in Middlesbrough. And we walked all the way, because we like walking, you know. We walked all the way from the train station to a pub I used to drink in called the Linthorpe. And it's right through the centre of town, all the way to the outskirts. And I'm not exaggerating it. I could get her on to tell you, in that sort of 3 mile, I would guess 80% of the inhabitants we saw were foreign. And I don't think it's shocking or controversial to say that when 80% of your town has been replaced by swarthy foreign chaps from the third world, I don't think it's controversial to say that that is an unsustainable and unwise level of immigration or course of action. It was staggering, genuinely staggering. And I will say, the caveat being that when I went to the nice posh areas, because I took her on some tourist stuff, it wasn't as bad, but that annoyed me as well. So I'm living up to my moniker. I am angry. I'm angry about that. They seem to have done it on purpose. Like, if you go to places like Harrogate or Ripon, it's not like that. But if you go to places that are rough, to me, it seems like it's almost like a ploy. Like the posh areas that vote Lib Dem seem to just outsource the responsibility of integrating immigrants to the poor areas. So I don't know, maybe a Lib Dem councillor living in York will tell you the opposite, but someone who's actually lived, born and raised somewhere like Middlesbrough and had to walk through it after a lengthy spell away will be staggered by the decline. And every local lad that I talk to in the pubs, because, you know, I'm a talker, I'd be in the local boozer and I'd say, I haven't been over a couple of years, lads. It's looking a bit rough, the town these days. Every one of them said the same thing, which is it's unrecognisable. We've been swamped by tens of thousands of men from all around the world. And the worst element, which I didn't really think of until I started chatting to the locals, was that it wouldn't even be so bad if they were all from one place. Like, at least if they were all from Somalia or Morocco or Algeria or somewhere, maybe there'd be a sense of community amongst that community. And then maybe they could have some sort of cohesiveness together. But when you've got seemingly 30 different nationalities there, all it is hostility. You're going to have Sunni and Shia and Muslim and non-Muslim and random men from all around the world. All we got during that 3 mile walk was hostile glares and general distrust and negativity from everyone we saw. It was awful. So I know Middlesbrough was already on the bottom rung. Somehow we've excelled ourselves and gone even lower. That sums up my trip back home.
Well, the reason why places like Middlesbrough and other places across the country have this issue and other areas don't is because of cost. It's because the posher areas, accommodation there is higher. So we've always had immigrants who turn up in the country, always go to the cheapest accommodation available. And it's always the poor white working areas, and they become the new slums. The immigrants who do well there then become middle class, they move out and go to better areas. But the new immigrants are always coming along. Now, when you left, so you say you left about 12 years ago to move to America? When you left 12 years ago, what was the percentage of foreigners living in Middlesbrough then?
It was higher than the national average. I know that for a fact because I read a story on the BBC about it. Me dad, when we invaded Iraq, right, in like 2003, me dad said to me, I hope you like it over there because when you come back, they'll have moved them all to Middlesbrough, right? And I laughed, thinking it was a quip. And then about 6 years ago, later, I read a story on the BBC which said, I think the headline's still there, we can probably find it. Why does Middlesbrough have the most immigrants? So he was joking, but he was right. He was making a quip and a point. And talking to you there, that explains it, which is good talking to a political fella. It's obvious now that it's down to property cost, isn't it? Because a terraced house in the borough will cost you 40 grand and about £200 in rent. In fact, in the terraced house in Middlesbrough, the landlord probably has to pay you to live there. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it was disproportionate, but I'd have guessed it was about 20%. Like you used to see foreigners walking through the town centre quite a lot, but nothing like what it is now. Nothing like it. The last 10 years, honestly, it's unbelievable. And as I said, I've talked to a lot of local lads, all the lads who are drinking me dad's Albuza. Everyone's aware of it. Everyone I spoke to said, you're not going to believe this, but somehow Middlesbrough's got worse. And it is entirely down to mass immigration. These people who say that they don't cost money and stuff, they're completely deluded. Like, even if you're on a low income, you're a net drain, right? If you're a minimum wage worker, yeah, it's good that you're productive and you're doing something. But if you're talking about school and housing and you're in a council house, your kids are getting educated, you're using the NHS, you know, even if you're working, you're breaking even half the time. But the idea that we've literally moved millions of people. I mean, we got 1 million in 1 year, didn't we, under Johnson? The idea that we've moved millions of people in and it's somehow been a benefit is preposterous to anybody who can do basic mathematics. I find it genuinely staggering that they're still making this argument in public that it's somehow good. I mean, the housing crisis can be explained almost entirely by immigration, almost entirely. Like every one of them needs somewhere to live. And if we got 1 million in 1 year, let's say we get 4 million in 5, they need houses. And it's basic, it's economics an 8-year-old could understand. If there's not enough houses and there's far too many people, then everything goes up in price. This isn't rocket science. So yeah, it was disproportionate in the borough. I'm not labouring under the delusion that it was a paradise before I left, but it's visibly, like, alarmingly gone downhill in the last five years.
Yeah, I mean, you hit a good point there. The days of saying immigration is a financial benefit to the country has been blown out the water. That may have been true 40, 50 years ago. I don't know. But at the moment, we know it's not true because we've had the government figures. Have you heard these figures? A low-skilled immigrant who moves to the country, by the time they reach 80, they cost the taxpayer nearly £500,000. And that's a low-skilled immigrant who's working. So a lot of them don't work. A lot of them, on social housing. Then then you've got to take into account NHS, schooling, criminal justice system, wear and tear on all our public services. They're a net drain. And we're still being lied to as if that's not the case. But we've got the figures now. The government figures tell us all that. I would imagine for you, it stings a little bit more than the average person because you've actually fought for your country. You put your life on the line. You've probably seen, you've probably had friends who didn't make it home from the Gulf War. Um, and the people you were fighting there to make our country. So, I mean, let's not get into was the war justified, and that's a different argument altogether. But you went there for the right reasons because your country said to you, "We need you," regardless if the country was wrong. But they said they needed you, and when you come back, some of the people you were fighting now live in the country, and it's as if, and this has been true now since the Second World War, because if you look at Germany and Japan, they were enemies in the Second World War, and then after the war, we spent all our money improving those countries. We've had wars since then, and we improve those countries we beat in war. We improve those countries now with our money. But we've got to a stage now where we beat someone in the war, then we invite them to come live with us. It's mental. As a former veteran, what's your say on that?
Well, there's two elements of that are ludicrous to me. The first one is that every single one of them, regardless of nationality, is called a refugee by these NGOs and left-wing charities. And even if they were, so this is the mad thing, let alone when they're coming from Algeria and Morocco and Bangladesh and places like that and claiming to be refugees, even if they are fleeing a war zone, even then, I don't think you should be guaranteed a right, because you should encourage people to do the right thing and dig their heels in for the people and for the nation. And my attitude is always, if the British people had the attitude that these lefty NGOs and these chancing men have, as soon as the old Austrian painter started barnstorming across Europe, the whole lot of the UK, they just went, let's go to Canada. Just do that. No, it's not my responsibility. See ya. We could have just. Both my granddads fought in the war. They didn't go, we'll just go to America. Let's move to America. We encourage cowardice and flight by fighting age men, by doing what we do, giving them free money. And I've always noticed, I made the point, do you remember when that viral photo went purposely by the machinations of the evil psychopaths that run the world these days? Alan Cudry, I even remember the name, of the child who washed up on a beach. He was a toddler, and they made the photo go viral. If you look into that story, his dad made it to Canada just fine. Strange that, isn't it? I don't think I'd watch my toddler get swept off a boat and just go, well, we can make more. I think I'd have jumped in after him and probably either saved him or lost my life trying. But strangely, he's now happy and safe and well in Canada. Wife and kids didn't make it. But seems like it didn't bother him too much. So there's that element, which I find truly ludicrous, like incentivizing people to flee tyrants instead of standing up to them. Like a school teacher knows you're supposed to stand up to a bully. We don't do that anymore. We tell them to leave. And the second element is, because we don't vet them, we aren't even just, in many cases, we aren't even just taking actual refugees. We really are taking, as you've just stated correctly, the enemy. I read a story a couple of years ago about a Yazidi woman. Those are the groups that were taken by ISIS and brutalized and forcibly married and used as sex slaves and all that type of stuff. I remember reading about one of them coming out of Aldi in Hamburg and bumping in to the same guy who took her captive and forced himself on her for like 2 years or something before she escaped. That's how bad it's got. And again, when you say this, I was ranting about it yesterday on my live stream. When you say this, the public discourse has got so toxic and filled with inanity and stupidity that nobody ever makes a real point. If you even say these things backed up by data and facts and logic and government numbers, they just go, fascist, Nazi. There's no discussion at all. And, I'm not above name calling. God knows I'm quite juvenile at times, but I like to try and pull your argument apart with facts and data and logic and reason. And these lunatics, if you say any of that stuff we've said, they just go, Nazi, and nobody talks about it. So I want to ask them that. If you've got a trafficked woman bumping into a full-blown killer and rapist when she's coming out of Aldi, and I want to stop that happening, and you were enabling it, how am I the bad guy? Please tell me that.
Oh, that's easy. That's because you don't understand that man's culture. He's come from a world where you don't understand that culture, and it's quite presumptuous of you, and it's quite disrespectful of you to think that man should have the same culture as us. And the Yazidi woman who's being raped and sold into sexual slavery, at least in the West, she can have an abortion. So, we're keeping her rights alive in this country. So we're not saying it's good to be raped, but at least she can murder her unborn baby if she doesn't want it. So these are the things you don't understand because you're just a white, straight, stale male who doesn't understand other people's cultures. And if you did and spent a bit of your time immersing yourself in these rich tapestry of cultures we have around the world, and they're not all perfect, but, compared to the British English culture, my God, they're so much better than our culture. That would be your answer, mate.
I'll tell you what, Nick, I think I'm funny, but you're a comedy genius doing that in such a deadpan fashion. I don't know how you didn't start laughing there. But that really is what the thing, isn't it? It's ludicrous. An element of that I've always found funny, Douglas Murray's talked about, is it's the subtle racism of low expectations. And I genuinely do think that's like what's going on here, because people like you and I, when you really get to know normal working class people, almost none of them are genuinely racist. I'd say this all the time because it's us that integrate the foreigners. In the 80s, they were dumping them all in Middlesbrough. So guess who went to school with lots of them? Me. And I've told this story loads of times. My best friend in primary school was Indian. It's called Bandari. He was my best mate in school. So we don't have an animus against foreigners. We just demand logic and common sense to the immigration process because we remember what the 80s were like. And in the 80s, they integrated because they trickled in. So Neil, my mate, he's a Borough fan. God bless him. Feel sorry for the fella. And he's fully integrated because he was a trickle and all of his school friends were like me. And it worked in the 80s when we had a process. And when our argument is always, it's not about hatred. It's about destroying the process of integration. So everybody's getting stitched up. Because now a Bandari doesn't come over and get educated and become an cultural Englishman and then get a good job and raise a good family. He doesn't. He gets indoctrinated by 10,000 other people from the same third world country he came from, and it ruins his outcomes for the rest of his life. He probably end up in poverty or in a gang, and it ruins the outcomes for everybody around them. Like, there's nothing good about it. And that's what we say. It's like the actually genuinely racist people are the Guardian readers who look at them and think they know everything about them. I was actually talking to a guy at work about it. There's a black lad who I work with, happens to be black. And he was saying to me, because he's seen my YouTube channel and he knows that my feelings. And he said to me, I voted for Trump and he was like, I hate liberals who think they know what I think. He was like, they're the most. And think of that. Trump was less popular with the black community in the States, but he got about 25% of the vote from the men. So 1 in 4 black men voted for Trump. But a fat purple-haired Guardian reader takes one look at him and says, Mr. Black Man, I know what you think about everything. Like, that's racism. You don't see an individual. We do. I think nothing other than he's less likely to be a Trump voter. Well, he might be. So I take him as an individual. These lefties practice the subtle racism of low expectations. They take one look at them and they think they know everything about them. And if they don't agree with them, they say, it's because you've been used by the system. You've got internalized racism. Let me, the educated white woman, tell you how it works. And then the other part of it is that where they see them misbehave and they go, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's their culture. Well, I don't think that. I blame the individual, but they do. So which one of us is prejudiced exactly?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Malcolm X understood this in the 60s. When I first read about Malcolm X, I thought he was a racist for being anti-white. But when you read him now, you understand he was anti-white liberal. He knew the white liberal were damaging the black community in America and treating them as children, treating them as disabled and trying to run their lives for them. He understood because he witnessed it and saw it himself. One thing about immigration, which I try to tell people, is immigration in the 80s wasn't a success. All that happened is it's worse now. So we look back to the 80s and go, oh, it was perfect in the 80s. The Windrush ship landed in 1948. And in 1950, the government of the day had to create a special cabinet report to investigate immigration and assimilation, because 2 years after Windrush, when we had loads of boats landing, nobody in 1950 wanted any more immigration. The people know, and this isn't just the English, this is throughout the world. Nobody wants immigration because it destabilizes communities. It destabilizes the poorest communities the most because their jobs go, their rents go up. It's them who feel the brunt of it. No one's ever wanted this, and that's why we've never been asked. But you said a word a minute ago that I'm glad you used, because I was going to use it. And that was the word coward. Because these men who run away, let's be honest, who run away from their ancestral homelands, who abandon their wives, children, family, friends, community, and nation, and run away to somewhere better to start a new life, they're cowards. And the reason why the West is better than the third world is because we had civil wars. We had wars with our neighbors. We slaughtered hundreds of thousands, if not millions of each other, until we became stable places to live. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that's just what happened. If we all ran away from France during the French Revolution, if we all ran away during the First World War, if we all ran away during the English Civil War, the West wouldn't be first world countries. But people invested their blood, and you'll know this as a soldier. You invest your blood for your nation, not for you to take those benefits, for your children and for those who come after you, for them to gain the benefits of your sacrifice. And the third world never understands that. They keep killing each other, abusing each other, tribal warfare, ripping each other off. And they'll always be the third world, not because of genetics, but because of culture. And why are we importing? I think in the last 15 years, we've imported 10 million foreigners in the last 15 years. This is why our country is failing.
Ludicrous. I mean, it's very true what you say, right? Essentially, warfare is like a kinetic version of the planting trees whose shades you'll never sit in. That's exactly what it is, because, you know, we're always talking about these minor sort of internecine warfare between Wales, Scotland, and England and the like. Well, none of the UK was a settled nation, if not for warfare. It was, you know, dozens of disparate tribes. And then eventually you get united by conflict. And then, because of all that conflict, the people bond over sort of shared suffering. That's a psychological thing that professionals have noticed, right? People bond very closely when they're in conflict. I listened to Rory Sutherland talking about it, and he was very right. He's a marketing guru, and he was saying the army knows how to build camaraderie. The government doesn't. And that's why. It's because when you're in suffering together, you bond like brothers. And it's very true. It's like a psychological quirk. It's probably one of the elements why they thrash you till your eyes bleed when you're doing your Royal Marines training, right? So you bond really closely with your brothers, and you die for them. And that's obvious what you've said there. So it's yet another element. There's always more than one reason for anything. I was listening to Peter Hitchens yesterday, and he was very angry about people taking one of his lengthy pieces and just focusing on one part of it and saying, "Oh, Hitchens is stupid." Like, he was talking about how people bonded more in the old days before central heating because they had a single room where they all used to congregate to get heated. And he said for months afterwards, the whole argument was like, Peter Hitchens wants to ban central heating. This is what I was talking about with no discourse anymore, where everyone's just willfully ignorant. There's always myriad reasons for it, but I think we've touched on 4 or 5 there. Nothing good comes from incentivizing cowardice and importing massive amounts of people. I'd disagree a little bit about immigration totally failing. I do think it works because it works for me here. When it's in tiny numbers, it's like, if to me, I'd even just do it mathematically. Being a military guy, I do logic and I do map reading, right? So I'd literally just figure out a number that we think works nicely. Like, oh, if you get one immigrant family for every 142 local families, then they integrate really well. And then I'd just get the map out, use Ordnance Survey, put a pin every like 400 meters or whatever it needs to be, and then stick them there. I'd be like, find a house there, find a house there, find a house there, disperse them widely. So they have to spend all the time with the locals. So for every kid from a foreign country, you've got 100 English kids around him in school. And he'll integrate. I do think it works if it's very well managed. But the Windrush is another example of why, well, of course it's not going to work. If you suddenly bring over 500 of them and you stick them in 4 streets in London, then they aren't going to be English when they grow up. They're going to be that little 4 streets. That's how you get Chinatown. But except at least Chinatown, they've got their own very unique culture and they set up stuff that we find quite quirky. I don't think little Mogadishu's anywhere anyone wants to go to. And that's what you get when you have 4 streets of Somalians living right next to each other. So that's exactly what we've done. We've done everything wrong for 50 years is what we've done.
No, absolutely, we have. I think your case is a little bit different. You personally are an immigrant because you've moved to America. But you're not an immigrant family. You married an American woman. So, do you have children?
No, I'm one of those selfish, nihilistic sort of Gen X types.
Yeah, because my point would have been, if you have children, your children wouldn't class themselves as English. Your children would class them. Yeah, your children would say, "I'm American. I was born in California. My mum's American. Almost my family here are American. I'm American. My dad's English, and I've got some English heritage there."
And being a chippy conservative, I've always said this. If we had a son and I heard him telling people he's English, I'd be like, no, you're not, you little shit. You're from America, because that's where you're born and raised. And that's where your mum's from. That's where your family's from. That is the cultural difference.
It is. But if you had married an English girl in the Borough and then emigrated to America to get a job in California, the odds of you feeling American would be a lot slimmer, because you're English, your wife's English, you're still practicing English cultures, all your family's back at home in England, and it's hard to integrate. You'd hope your children will integrate, but what happens with second generation immigrants is then they have this dream of the old lands. And we have it. I had it at school with my Pakistani friends. I had it with one of my best friends whose mum and dad were Irish. And he said to me once during the first Gulf War, he said to me, we were drunk in his flat and we're having silly conversations. And we had, if England, it came to, if England had a war with Ireland, who would you fight for? Because my dad was Irish, but mum's English. And I said, well, no matter who England's enemy was, they would be my enemy. And he said, oh no, I'd fight England. I would join the Irish army and I would fight England. And I said, why? You were born here. You went to school here. You own your first house here. All the benefits have been living here. But your mum and dad were immigrants. I get that. And he went, no, I'm Irish. And he was white and Irish. I had the same thing with Pakistani friends at school. That's the problem, is second, third generation, because unless you marry into that culture, you're never part of that culture. And that's a big problem.
Very good point. I never actually thought of that. Yeah, because think about it. All my family's back in the borough. There's only me here. So everything we do, we go and see all of her nieces and nephews and cousins and everyone. Everyone's American. I go to Thanksgiving, they have a big party. You do become forcibly integrated. But I suppose we do align at the end, because the point is the same, isn't it? It's making sure that you isolate the migrants so they're forced to integrate. So if you get like my mate, like I said, Bandari, I guarantee he's grew up, born and raised in the borough, and married a lass from the borough, and their kids will be borough. But if he was in that little community where he's in the street and every single kid around him's a Pakistani or an Indian, his wife is going to be a Pakistani or an Indian, and his kids, well, his wife's probably going to be his cousin. I've seen the numbers. So, and then the kids are going to be the same. They're only going to speak that language. The culture is going to be entirely that. So this is what I'm saying, though, why it will work if you do it in very small numbers. Like if you bring them in, if you bring one family from India and ditch him in the middle of Edinburgh when there's no foreigners there, the kids will integrate. Maybe, like you said, maybe not first generation, but you can totally understand this morass that we're in. whereby Merkel talked about it years ago, which is another hilarious point. She said multiculturalism had failed 15 years ago under relatively good conditions. And now we act like it's going to work now. She said it was a failure. And then that kid washed up on the beach, and all of a sudden she collapses the borders of Europe. And it was a failure because she rightly pointed out that you had third generation Turks who were born in Germany and couldn't speak German. It's the exact same thing. You have to make them integrate. And that's what I'm saying. The real issue we've got is England was so well led for centuries that English people have almost got far too tolerant and far too free with the idea of just letting you do what you like. As I said to you, the people who lived under the yoke of communism in Eastern Europe, it's no coincidence that Hungary and Poland are a lot more based than we are, because they know what it's like to have everything stripped from you. And that's what I'm saying. I think we could have arrested the problem if we had less tolerance for freedom and stupidity. Like, we should not be letting immigrants come in and just decide where they're going to go, because then they set up little Mogadishu in the middle of Middlesbrough. We should be taking them. If you're living here, we're vetting you aggressively. And if you get lucky enough that we decide you can stay, we're telling you where you're living. And what we tell them to do is stick them in the middle of a village where every single person within 5 miles of them is from England. Maybe then it'll work. But doing what we're doing now is just suicide.
How about we take one step back from that and we say we don't need any immigration, so therefore the numbers are zero, you're not coming?
Well, I don't disagree with you in principle at this point. But as I said to you, despite the fact you instantly get called a fascist, a crypto fascist when you go online, I'm a lapsed liberal. Like, I had a very open idea with I was very centre left in many aspects up until like 10 years ago. Like, in fact, less than that. I quite liked Obama. It's got so bad now that I've been reluctantly dragged into that position. So I don't disagree with you. I'm just desperately clinging to playing devil's advocate, because it did make some logical sense to me 15 years ago. I think with the dire straits we're in now, I fully agree with you. I think ultimately at this point, that number should be zero. When we've got literally 17 million disabled people and 3 or 4 million NEETs and 8 million dollies, we're in dire straits. We need zero immigration. Like, ultimately, there's literally 25 million people who could do with the job in the UK. So yeah, I'm happy with zero now, but I wouldn't have been there 10 years ago.
Let's end with this one question, a quick question. You may go home again in a year or two, 2-3 years from now, you may visit home again. And if you do, let's get a pint. But next time you go home, what differences would you like to see?
Well, first thing first, I'm going to try and get my body armor, helmet, and rifle back from the military before I go back to Middlesbrough. I'd like to wear them when I'm walking through towns. The differences I like to see, but they're not going to happen, Nick. Labour's still going to be in power when I get back, and we know what Labour are all about. They will keep bringing people over until you get total financial and civilizational collapse. I'd like to see every single illegal, and again, this isn't controversial. Obama did the same. I'm not even there yet. Like I said, I'm not quite as right-wing as many people. I'm not even there with just mass deportations. I'm with deport every single person who's got a criminal record, came in illegally, and finally, who is a drain. If there's anyone there who hasn't paid national insurance for the last 3 years, bought or those 3 things, to me, I don't even think of that that hardcore. You don't have to start picking on people who've never done anything wrong. But we could fix, and this is the olive branch I keep saying, the government, if they had the brains that the gods gave a goose would have took, is that you can placate and stop the far right coming into power if you just have common sense. Because saying things like deport foreign criminals and deport illegal immigrants and deport people who are thieves and crooks and cheats and deport people who've never worked a day in their life and have been on benefits for 7 years, that isn't controversial to almost anyone. And if they just did that, you'd suddenly get rid of about 6 million people, and you wouldn't even have to start doing anything controversial. And then all of a sudden, it's like a pressure cooker. You're letting some steam off. There'd be houses, there'd be hospital beds, there'd be school places. The roads would be in better nick. Like it would, if they just did the basics in 1985, there would be no talk of a far right. But if they don't grasp the nettle and get it sorted, the whole of Europe's going to go into a very dark place again. And I tried to warn them. But one of these days, probably happen on the continent first. It always does. They'll end up with a full-blown barnstorming fascist in charge. And when it happens, they'll go, whoa, this is weird. Why did this happen? And people like me and you will be sat there going, well, we told you why it was going to happen, because you didn't do the basics.
Matty, I try to end all my podcasts on a high, but today I'm not going to, because this is too serious. And I completely agree. We've got to feel some pain if we're going to get the changes to improve, maybe not our lives, but again, our children's lives, the people who come after us. That should always be our focus.
Yeah, it gets much worse before it gets better, Nick. That's what I'm thinking.
Matty, you've depressed me, but in a good way. Let's catch up again soon.
Like listening to The Cure. Yeah, cheers, Nick.
Bye-bye.
See you, mate.